Okay, so we started last week on Lamed Daled Amid Beis with an edict of Rav Huna, and we went through this, and I think that it bears some review because it's a little confusing, and we're going to pick this up, so we really have to have a little background. So let's go back to Lamed Daled Amid Beis, in the middle where it says Teku. So Teku ended that portion of the Gemara. It's about a little bit less than halfway down the page. And the Gemara starts by saying, Omer Rav Huna, right? So we started that last week. You'll remember, Rav Huna says, Mashbino shvua she'eno b'rshuso, that the shomer has to always make a shvua that the item is not in his reshus. Why? My Thomas is the Gemara. The Chayshinan Shema Einav Nosen Ba, because he may covet it, and it's easy enough to say that it got lost. He'll pay for it. He's more than happy to pay for it, but that's not proper for him to take it. So the Gemara makes a statement, a blanket statement that Rav Huna says that in every case there is a shvua that the shomer has to make that ain't a b'shuso. Okay, that's kind of the doctrine law that we work under. Then the Gemara went ahead and gave us a number of cases, Reisha and Seifa, not relevant to Rav Huna directly, but the upshot was a kasha on Rav Huna. If you remember, the Gemara gave us 4 cases. It gave us 2 cases related to the malveh and 2 related to the loveh. And just simply to recount, the cases are where the malveh lends, he lends, let's make it easy, a seller, he lends $100 and he takes collateral of $100 and loses the collateral. And so we say he's lost the collateral, but the collateral was the same as the loan. So there's nothing wrong there, because remember that the halacha is a person only makes a shvua when he's challenged and he responds differently than the challenge. For instance, I say, I lent you $100, and you say, oh, no, you lent me $75. That opens up the need for a shvua because there is not universality between what's being asked and what's being said. So if there's a difference between what is being asked and what's said, there has to be a shvua. But if what's being asked and what's being said is the same, the Torah says, we're not going to make you make a shvua if you're agreeing with what was said in whole. There's no need for a shvua. Only if it's different. What does it mean it's different? No, you lent me $100 and I gave you a mashkin of $125. So then now there is not universality, there's not equal amounts. In which case there has to be a shvua that the loan was collateralized with 125. As long as it's equal, no shvua. Once it's not equal, to make a shvua. That was the reisha. That had to do with the lender. Now, with the borrower, it's the same thing. The borrower says, I borrowed $100, but I give you collateral for $100, that's totally equal. But if he says, I gave you collateral for $75, so that now we're not equal. So he has to swear that there was only $75 worth of collateral, not $100 worth of collateral. Again, same principle. As long as everything is equal, no shvua comes about. Once things are unequal, whether it's on the lender side or on the borrower side, then you have to make a shvua. Okay, that's what that whole portion of the Mishnah on Lamed Daled Amid Beis came to tell us. Then the upshot of that was, if that's the case, you're giving me this whole story. There has to be universality. There has to be equal lender and borrower. And if not, then we have sort of a dichotomy. Wait a minute. if you follow Rav Huna's principle is very simple. The shomer has to swear it's not in his rishus. Once he swears it's not in his rishus, everything else is irrelevant. What are we worried about? Because the Gemara says that we're worried that maybe the lender will have a different valuation than the borrower, and we have a concern that if they're different and it turns out that the lender is correct in his valuation, then he can nullify the borrower from ever swearing, because it's a very restrictive and prohibitive situation where if I put myself on the line and I say something is worth $100 and I'm proven wrong, I am now sort of being dubbed or as an untruthful person, and I can no longer give testimony. That's a very serious thing. We don't want to disqualify someone from ever giving testimony because he made a mistake and didn't quite accurately reflect how much something is worth. So therefore, we say, in order to preserve the borrower, we make the lender swear. The lender is the one who swears, oh, it's worth $100, and therefore he can't impugn the borrower. Frek the Gemara, if that's the case, and we're worried about impugning him, what's there to impugn? He's making a shvua that he doesn't have it in his possession. If he doesn't have it in his possession, there'll never be a case where he'll impugn him. Because how can he impugn him when there is no longer collateral? It's gone. It's gone. It's not there.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Okay.
When you, before this point you just made now, when you, the basic setup of the lending and the value of the security, it's not likely that whatever somebody borrows, there's going to be a security worth exactly the same value. In that, with that setup, you're sort of setting it up that somebody has to swear, because you can't really, you lend $100, but a coat is worth, 75 or 120. It's not, you're not likely to find a security item.
That's exactly the right amount.
Yeah. So how did they let this go this far in terms of the possibility of swearing in many cases, at least?
That's an interesting point, and it's a good point. But I think we're working off an assumption that that collateral items have a general worth. For instance, if I buy a coat, I'm buying it, just an example, I buy it from the rack that says $100, right? So is it 100? Is it 105? Is it 110? Okay, fine. But we know be'erech what the price is. So when the lender says, I'm going to lend you money and I want you to give me collateral from that rack, which is $100, right? So we don't have to necessarily say it's 100 or 101 or 102. We know be'erech, generally, what it should be, and that's the amount. And so the borrower can say, yeah, I gave you from that rack. I gave you collateral from that rack that was $100. We're not going to worry about 101, 102, but yeah, it was from that rack. It wasn't from the $200 rack. It was from the $100 rack. So in other words, he's kind of indicating that it was a 1-for-1. If he comes back and says, you know what, that rack was really wrong. I gave you collateral, and that collateral was from the $75 rack. Obviously, 3 dinrim being 75% of a sellout was enough of a gap to make it sort of value added. So we're saying that if he disputed it to the extent that it was 3 dinrim instead of a sellout, then okay, now we've got a problem. Therefore, he has to make a shvua. So what are we worried about? So there's 2 things we worry about. The one thing we worry about who's holding the collateral. And the second thing we worry about is whether or not someone misspeaks and says, oh, that was really worth 125. I gave you more collateral than your loan. And then later on, we find out that that's not the case. So we're kind of hanging a chakran label on the love because he overstated the amount of the collateral. And we don't want to do that. So the Gemara says two things. First, the Gemara says that the shomer has to always swear that he did not convert. That's absolute. And second, since it's the love that we want to protect, we say that the malve is the one who has to step forward and give a valuation, not the love, but the malve. Because if the love gives a valuation and it turns out he's wrong, then he's forever impugned as being a chakran because he didn't state the right amount. So by shifting it to the malve, we say, okay, malve, we're going to put the burden on you, and you're the one who's going to have to make the pronouncement as to what it's worth, and therefore you will not impugn the love. That's the principle of what our Gemara is telling us in this whole Lamed Daled Lamed Beis.
So
Right,
the
the Gemara.
bottom line is that this is a plus and minus some reasonable amount from the actual loan value.
Right. So we say plus minus a little bit is okay, but plus minus a dinner that's $25, right? Because 4 dinner mikam 1 selah, we say that's already a bigger gap. So in the parlance of the Gemara, it's the difference between saying that my collateral was $100 or 125. 125 is already a significant difference than 100. It's not like 102, 103. Again, the Gemara is giving us sort of, again, we have to put this into our mind's eye as general numbers. So we have a shekel, we have a selah, we have a dinner. Once we get, out of the reach of those numbers, then we start worrying that the guy is not being truthful or being accurate. So again, for our purposes, we can leave it that way. But now the Gemara has, so the kasha that we were left with is, if in fact, and this flips up, takes us into Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, because we said the bottom of Lamed Daled Lamed Beis. Now the Im Isa Rav Huna, if you believe in Rav Huna's edict that the shomer always has to make a shruah, saying that I didn't convert, what are we worrying about? Remember, the second shvuah is the shvuah of valuation, that the collateral is worth such and such. If you're going to say, according to Rav Huna, that he has to make a first shvuah, that it's not in his possession, what are we worried about valuations? How is it going to come to a valuation when he doesn't have it? Heicha mapik law, says the Gemara, he doesn't have it. He just swore that he doesn't have it in his rishus. How is he going to impugn the love and say, love, you gave me the wrong number, therefore you're disqualified from ever testifying? That can't happen because he's already said, I don't have it. So in other words, the Gemara is saying, what are we worried about that second shvuah of valuation when the first shvuah of it's in my possession takes care of everything already, right? That's the kasha of the Gemara. After going through an elaborate process in this Mishnah of whether or not we make a shvuah of moed b'miktzas because he said, oh, it's worth 5 dinarim and not worth a selah or whatever, that's the Gemara's kasha. If Rav Huna's edict is really sound, and that's the shvuah that you make, anything after that is irrelevant. You've already made a shvuah that it's not in your possession. Why worry whether the lova makes the shvuah evaluation or the malva makes the shvuah evaluation? There's never going to be a case where that's going to come to the fore because he already swore that he doesn't have it. right? So once he swears he doesn't have it, he will be a liar if he says, "Oh, wait a minute, I do have it." In other words, so he's going to impugn himself. That's the Gemara's kasha really. Is if you hold of Rav Huna's chiddush that the shomer has to always swear first off, I don't have it, then there's never going to be a case to worry about who should swear on valuations, because we want to switch the valuation from the lova to the malva, and we're saying, what's the big deal? It doesn't matter. It's never gonna be relevant. That's the Gemara's kasha. So Rashi says, Isha Rav Huna shehashomer hamishalem damin nishba swears she'einu b'reshuso. Why are we worried about, oh, he's going to swear and say it's the wrong valuation? We're never going to get to that. He's already said, I don't have it. It can never happen. That's the Gemara's kasha. According to Rav Huna, that's the Gemara's kasha, is that the secondary shvua becomes somewhat irrelevant. So now the Gemara comes back and says, no. Omar Rava, you know what? There is a case. Sheyesh Eidim shenisrifa. Okay, we're bringing Eidim that the collateral was burnt in a fire, right? So what's the point? So if the lender doesn't even have to swear that he doesn't have it, because the fire is the best evidence that he doesn't have it, therefore, says the Gemara, so what he has to make some shvua, something. So therefore, he makes the shvua in order to say that the borrower is not a shakran. It's kind of an oddity. If you're going to say that something doesn't exist, then why are you worried about a shvua as to what that item is of value if it doesn't exist? It's a stira. It's a stira. So the Gemara wants to answer, you know what? He has to make some shvua. So we're not going to make him make a shvua that he doesn't have it, because there was a fire. It burnt up. Therefore, we're going to make him swear that the collateral was worth, let's say, a sella, that it was worth $100 or whatever the case may be. So in other words, the Gemara is determined to say he has to make a shvua, and since he can't make the shvua of mapik law because the fire burnt it up, he has to make a different shvua. So that's how the Gemara wants to answer it. You're right. Really, once he says it's not in my possession, then that's it. But since he doesn't even have to testify it's not in my possession, because everybody knows there was a fire and the fire consumed the object, so he never has to make that shvua. So what shvua is he going to make? He'll make the shvua that it's worth a sella. We're determined that he's going to make a shvua. The question is which shvua. So if normally Rav Huna says he makes the shvua that he always makes is that it's not in my rishus, okay, fine. Then that's the shvua you make. But if it got burnt, that's a superfluous shvua. What are you going to say? It's not in my possession. Everybody knows there was a 4-alarm fire and the whole thing got burnt up. What am I going to make a shvua? It's not in my possession when we know it burnt up. Says the Gemara. Okay, so in that particular case, we have to make him make the shvua of what? How much it's worth, the valuation.
So Rabbi, doesn't this insistence on a shvua fly in the face of the general reluctance to make shvuas if not necessary?
Say it again, David.
Doesn't this insistence that there must be a shvua, doesn't that fly in the face of the well-known traditional reluctance to make a shvua?
Right. So typically we would, yeah, I would agree that we try to have him avoid shvuas, but it seems that Rav Huna, this is Rav Huna now. Rav Huna says no, the shomer has to make a shvua. I can't let him get away without making a shvua. What's the shvua? The shvua is that I didn't convert. Even though, yes, is that a superfluous shvua? According to Rav Huna, that's an important shvua that a shomer always has to make. He has to make one shvua. And that shvua is that I did not convert. But if you can no longer make that shvua, because on its face, you didn't convert it. Everybody knows you didn't convert it because there is a fire. Then, and Rav Huna says you still have to make that shvua. Then we're transferring that shvua to another shvua, to the shvua of how much it's worth. So, to your point, yeah, you're right. We typically say sonei shvuas, that we don't want to make shvuas, but according to Rav Huna, you can't get away from it. There is a shvua that has to be made. And if that shvua can't be made, then we're going to shift, rather than say no shvua at all, according to Rav Huna, we're going to shift his nemanis to a different shvua. So right, it flies in the face of what we would normally say you don't want to make shvuas, but Rav Huna has already established, bar none, he has to make a shvua. But in this case, it's useless to make the shvua because it burns. So what is he going to say? I swear that I don't have it. Everybody knows you don't have it. There was a 4-alarm fire. That there wasn't a charred remain of anything. So now
isn't that
complaints? Okay. So do we avoid making a shvua, or since Rav Huna says he has to make a shvua, we have to find something else that he can swear?
But isn't that a shavua in vain, as David suggests? I mean, we try to avoid that at all costs. And then here, it's form over substance. We've got to find the reason, according to Rabbi Huna, to make the shvua.
So that, again, that's a very good point. But remember, in Rav Huna, you're right. Other man will say the shvua is forget about it. You don't have to make a shvua. And we're going to see right away that how we avoid. We want to avoid shvuas. But since Rav Huna is determined to say that there is one shvua that the shomer always has to make, and if he can't make that shvua, we don't say it's obsolete, don't make a shvua. We say just shift the shvua to something else. So this is Rav Huna's shita. You're right, Michael, that others will say, what do you mean? He doesn't make a shvua, so he's absolved. So there's no shvua here. But Rav Huna gave us a doctrine, and the doctrine is that there's always a shvua that the shomer has to make. And that shvua is that I don't have it in my possession. Says the Gemara, but if you have a fire and it's not in your possession, what should you do? What should you do? So according to Rav Huna, now we shift. You're right. Others will say, no, forget about it, no shvua. Rav Huna will say, since I say you have to have a shvua, and again, so you could ask the question, but we're saying shvuas, we don't want to make shvuas. Why would Rabbi Huna insist that there be any shvua at all? And the answer is because in business, we want to have certainty. So Rav Huna comes along and says, you know what? We're going to have certainty that a person who is a shomer will never convert something improperly. And it's worth the shvua, which we're reluctant to make, so that people will trust him. This is a balancing test. You're right. Shvua, yes, shvua, no shvua. But since in Mekach and Memker, if I do business with you and I have the slightest doubt in my mind that you're not honest because you'll take a mashkin and you'll like it and you'll say, you know what, it got lost, but really you took it. So in order to preserve the integrity of the relationship between a seller and a buyer or a lender and a borrower, Rav Huna is the one who comes up with this shvua and says, I'm going to make, even though I don't like shvuas, we always say shvuas are not the best thing to do. In order to preserve the integrity of a relationship, a commercial relationship, we're going to make sure that there is a shvua that everybody can feel comfortable that no one's getting away with something. So that's a balancing test. I grant you, it's a balancing test. There are those who will say, no, we shouldn't make the shvua. And Rav Huna comes and says, yes, a shvua, one shvua is important. And that's the shvua that I didn't convert. Now,
Right.
if we have a situation where that shvua is no longer valid because it got burnt up, then what's the next step? So according to Rav Huna, the next step is you make a different shvua. Not everybody will agree with that, but Rav Huna says, okay, you can't make that shvua because it's totally superfluous. We know it got burnt, so we're going to make a shvua that it was that which would be the borrower's shvua normally. We're going to convert it to the lender, and the lender will make a shvua and say that this chayfetz, this collateral, was a selah. Why will we do that? Because we want to preserve the integrity of the borrower, because if he says, oh no, it's not a selah, it's 3 dinrim, and later on it turns out to be a selah, he will be impugned from ever being able to give witness because he lied. In other words, it wasn't just $1 or $2. The difference between a dinar and a selah is $25. So we consider that to be choshev. So in other words, we're making the malveh take the burden of the oath so as not to impugn the integrity of the lova. It's a little bit confusing, but remember, we're dealing specifically here with Rav Huna, and Rav Huna's view is different than the view of other Amoraim, and other Amoraim might argue that we don't need a shvua, there's no shvua, forget about the shvua. Rav Huna is the one who made that insistence that there is a shvua, and once you can no longer use that shvua, Rav Huna is not willing to say, forget about it, there's no shvua. He still wants to have a shvua, and he shifts it from the shvua of it's not in my possession to the shvua of, oh, it's worth 3 dinrim or whatever the case may be. So, in other words, there is some difficulty here, and David made that point too, and so did you, Michael. But the fact of the matter is that we're dealing specifically with Rav Huna, and Rav Huna is the one who stands by his position. Others may disagree.
Well, Rabbi
Grauman, quick question, if the fire was witnessed, okay, why would there be any question as to his integrity? Why do we need a backstop to preserve his integrity in the form of a shvua? The fire was witnessed, and he says it's gone, and the witnesses saw the piece of whatever it was burn up. What more do you need?
So you're hitting on in other words, what you're asking is, since the fire burnt it up,
It was witnessed.
and that was witnessed, why are we worried about the integrity of the borrower when he says how much it's worth, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good underlying question, and the Mefarshim deal with that, and they what they say is, yes, the fire burnt it up, but perhaps it was the wrong mashkin. You know, this they pull out of thin air. They say, yes, it was a fire, and that fire burnt it up, so we no longer have to worry about it. Okay, I grant you. So then your question is, if so, what are we worried about? Valuations, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Say the Mefarshim, in the unlikely event that this mashkin was not the correct mashkin, and somehow the right collateral will reappear. So we have to we still protect the integrity of the borrower and not let him make a statement that will impugn his character later. It's a stretch. It's really a stretch. It's a good question, and it's a stretch. Why should we worry about it? It's over. The carrot is, it's over, but maybe it's not over. So in other words, this is one of those situations where the Gemara is going to check itself and say, yes, there was a fire. The fire burnt it up. It doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, then why make a shvua at all? So we're going to come full circle and say, you know why we make a shvua? Because maybe in the remote possibility that this was not the correct mashkin, and the correct mashkin will appear, and that it'll be worth 3 dinrim, and he said it was worth a selah, And once again, the borrower is going to be impugned because he wasn't truthful. So it's a very tough, that's why I said this is a very tough situation to deal with, is because these are hypotheticals that we say, well, how will they exist? There was a fire, there was a fire. Let's accept there was a fire. And the Mefarshim say, okay, there was a fire. But maybe the fire burnt the wrong thing. So, yeah, when you look into the Mefarshim, it's a little bit of a difficult stretch here as to how we interpret this Gemara. But again, there are two principles that come out of this Gemara. Number one, that the Shomer always has to make a shvua that he didn't convert. According to Rav Huna, no question. We hate shvuas, but that shvua we have to make. And secondly, we have to preserve the integrity of a borrower when he says it's worth so and so that he shouldn't be later found to be a shakran. And so we say that the shvua that he would make, that it's worth, let's say, 3 dinrim, switches to the lender. Your question is, but it's irrelevant. That shvua should be totally irrelevant. And in theory, the answer is yes, it should be totally irrelevant. But since in the remote possibility that mashkin will turn out to have been the wrong mashkin, why you think that, I don't know, then we'll say, you know what, we're still protecting the love because we made the malva swear that it was worth X dinrim or sella or whatever, and not the love. It's a real mystery. I'm going to tell you, it's a complicated mystery why we even go down that route. But obviously, the Amoraim, when they were debating this, they said, you know what, even with a fire and everything consumed with a fire, maybe we need to worry that the wrong mashkin was consumed. I mean, that's ultimately the only answer that that we give. And then Rashi says, "Yesh edim shenisrifa the hashta lo ashvinu shehave." He doesn't have to swear. Shehari heavy edim. He brought witnesses. So you see Rashi himself, in trying to understand that edim and nisrifa, he says, "I brought witnesses that it was burned. So what am I worried about?" Nevertheless, says the Gemara, that we have to worry about. So if we have to worry about, now let's look at the question of the Gemara is your question. If we're going to say that it was burnt, then how are we going to prove that the collateral wasn't what the Lova said it was? It's burnt. Where is he going to bring the collateral from if it was burnt up? Right? So the Gemara is asking that question of itself. If you're going to say that the fire burnt it up and there's no possibility, that's why they had to come and say that there is, as remote as possibility as it is, it may have been the wrong collateral, and therefore there will be collateral that will be brought out, and it will show that the lover wasn't truthful. So Elam Rabbi Yosef, you know what our situation is? I'm going to give you a different set of facts. It didn't get burnt. Now, maybe it makes sense. There were edim that it was stolen. Fire means irretrievable.
And no edim.
No, right. Nignava, in theory, is not irretrievable because it was stolen. The Gemara, still, how is he going to prove it? In other words, how is he going to bring this collateral to the fore to show that the lover was not truthful in what he said? It was stolen. Who knows where it is? So now we've opened the door, says the Gemara, the Torah u'maisele. You know what he's going to do? He is going to put on his investigative cap, and he's going to find out who the ganef is. He's going to go search, and he'll bring it to the fore and show what the real valuation was. So now that we switched facts, that it's not burnt, but it's only stolen, that means that there's the possibility that it can be retrieved. And once you have the ability that it can be retrieved, you have to make the shvua. Again, this is all about why do we make this shvua? What's the, it's over, it's gone. The teretz is, it's not gone. We wanted to say with fire that maybe was the wrong one, but certainly with Geneva, we can say the Torah Chomaisela, that the Malveh will dig, he'll hire investigators, and maybe we're talking about an expensive gem or something, and he will be the one who will uncover it and say, oh, you see that? We do have it. And therefore, what is he going to do? He's going to impugn the Loveh. That's why the oath switches from the Loveh to the Malveh, so that the Malveh cannot later impugn the Loveh. The Gemara, Yehacha ki mishnava Malveh nami l'terach Loveh v'leisi. So now let's switch. So switch it around. If we say that the witnesses say that, where's he going to bring it from? Right? Where's he going to bring it from? So we say, at the end of the day, maybe it's the Loveh who will do the investigating, right? The Loveh will be the one who will bring the witnesses to show that he was right. So, and he'll impugn the Malveh. Now, just like we impugn the Loveh, and therefore we say we switch the Shvua from the Loveh to the Malveh, once the Loveh may hire investigators, and so he'll bring the same witnesses and flip the script on the Malveh, right? He'll flip the script on the Malveh because the Malveh will be the one who will have falsely stated it's worth X. So you want to protect the Loveh. I get it. You want to protect the Loveh and say, therefore, the Malveh has to be the one to swear. But wait a minute. What happens if the script is flipped and it's the Loveh who will discover? And for the Gemara, Bishloi Malveh Yodaman Ko'ayel V'Nafik B'Desa. No, we're going to be reasonable. The Malveh knows who went in and out of his house. So let's say he has 5 suspects. One of those 5 stole it. No one else was in his house. So he has a finite number of leads, according to what the Gemara is telling us now, to go ahead and to hire someone to find it out. So it's relevant to say that the Malveh will be the one who will investigate and ultimately may come out with finding out who stole it. So therefore, we protect the Loveh in that instance.
Question
right?
here. Question.
But the Loveh, Ela Loveh, miyodaman ayal v'nafik b'beis of the Malveh. How does the Loveh know who was in the Malveh's house? Because this all stemmed from the Malveh. So the Malveh will know who was in his house. He'll know where to investigate. Therefore, he should make the shvua because you don't want to impugn the Loveh. The Loveh, on the other hand, what good will it do if the Loveh hires an investigator? He doesn't know where to begin. Who is he going to interview? Who's he going to talk to? He doesn't know who went into the Malveh's house. So in other words, the Gemara is giving us an example of an understanding of why it's the Malveh who is the one who has to make the shvua because he controls the entire process, whereas the Loveh has no clue who might have stolen it, and therefore he's out of the picture. Again, this is a very unusual Gemara here in trying to help us understand the relative rights between the Malveh and the Loveh.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I may be totally wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm a little confused here. Let's say hypothetically, it's gives the code as collateral. It's worth nominally $100. The loan is $100, but maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less in terms of the value, and that's where we get to this whole issue. Fine. if the coat is stolen from the lender's house, at the end of the term of the loan, essentially correct or incorrect, that the borrower now doesn't have to, if the numbers are exactly the same, the borrower doesn't pay back because the lender lost because it got stolen from his house under his protection, correct?
And doesn't have to make a shvua because he's not denying.
Right, but the point is that it's ignoring the shvua issue for the moment. The bottom line though is the borrower should have to pay the $100 back, but since he can't get his collateral back, which is the lender's responsibility, so therefore the borrower doesn't get his collateral back, but he keeps the $100.
Right.
So he's basically even.
He's even.
Nominally, depending on the value, the actual
Right,
value of the
right.
collateral.
Right.
Whereas the lender is the one who's now out.
Right.
Okay. So therefore, if the numbers are exactly the same, the lender has huge incentive to go ahead and investigate and try to find the thief, because otherwise he's out of the money.
That's right.
Whereas the borrower has no significant incentive. Maybe he liked that coat, but he has no significant incentive unless there's a major difference of, let's say that the coat was really worth $1,000.
Right.
Then the
Has an incentive to go ahead and try
the
to.
borrower has the incentive to do it. On the other hand, if the coat was only worth $50, he has no incentive. Again, that's the shvua question might be, is it, but he'd have no incentive to go searching for it, whereas the lender still would, because
Right.
he'd be out $50 worth of it.
Right. So what the Gemara is telling us, that this is stacked. It's stacked. Our bias is to protect the love at the
Right.
expense of the malva.
Effectively, that's what ends up happening.
Effectively, that's exactly what the Gemara is telling us, is that it's stacked. And the reason why it's stacked, let's go back to point number one. The reason why it's stacked is because Rav Huna says there has to be a shvua here. And what is that shvua? That I didn't convert. Once Rav Huna says there is that shvua, that's already black letter law. There is a shvua. Now, if that shvua goes away, according to Rav Huna, there still has to be a shvua. I know, Michael, everybody's upset. Why does there a shvua? We say we're signing shvuas. David said we're signing shvuas. All 100% right, but not according to Rav Huna. According to Rav Huna, that shvua still has to be made. But if I can't make the shvua that I want to make, then I'm going to make a different shvua. And the shvua is going to be, what's the value of the item? But a shvua nevertheless will be made. So it flies in the face of what we've been talking about in the past about sonei shvuas, but Rav Huna takes the position that at least one shvua has to be made here. And if that shvua goes away, then there is a secondary shvua that gets shifted to the malveh, right? It gets stacked and it gets shifted to the malveh, and the malveh has to make that shvua. We just said, wait a minute, you're going to want him to make the shvua. Maybe it's the loveh who is going to be chasing after the malveh and everything else. Says the Gemara, that's not likely. It's not likely that the loveh will be the one who's chasing after the malveh. It's more likely that malveh would be chasing after the loveh. And again, maybe we have to put our mindset into the time of the Gemara. It's not like today, where a person who borrows, and we're going to see this, by the way, in a pasuk, which is an amazing pasuk from the Mishnah. A borrower has far more to lose than a malva. In other words, the supposition is that a malva is a rich guy. That's the supposition, whereas the lova is not a rich guy. So it's stacked sort of. We got to protect the lova because he's not the rich guy. He needs to reach out and borrow money. Whereas the malva, okay, so he has the money. It's not such a gofela. Not that we want him to lose anything, but he's not a poor guy. The lova, on the other hand, is the poor guy. So it's kind of stacked anyway, in that sense, against the lova. Therefore, we want to find every opportunity to shift the responsibility to the malva. That's what Rav Huna is telling us. So,
So
which-
what's the halakhic status of the malva? What kind of a shomer is he? Because we could increase his definition of what kind of a shomer he is.
he's a shomer chinam.
But if we raised it to ones that had more
The
responsibility,
Gemara will tell us right away he's a shomer chinam because it's chayiv and pshia, meaning that if I give you collateral, you're responsible for that collateral, even if and we say shomer chinam is only chayiv for pshia. It's not chayiv for Gnei Vaved or anything else. You, as the holder of the collateral, are a shomer chinam, right? Because you're not getting paid. There's no ribbis. You're not getting paid for it. So all you have to do is guard it and return it. And
Can you use it? Can you use the collateral?
No,
You cannot.
no.
why didn't the Gemara raise the status when somebody has this kind of a transaction? The collateral, the malver is in a higher category of responsibility for that collateral. And therefore, the malva is going to be the one who's going to have to replace the collateral, no matter what. That would protect the lova in a very, very tight manner. Instead of all of this, and it doesn't come to shvua. He's automatically responsible to replace the collateral. Period. He doesn't have to. Why should he have to make shvuas? It just seems there's too many shvuas being created here in these different scenarios. And the Gemara doesn't want to make a lot of shvuas.
Right. Which is why I re-emphasize that this whole Gemara starts out by only according to Rav Huna. There are other Amoraim who disagree with him and who don't hold this same sheet.
Okay.
So we're dealing with Rav Huna, who gave us an edict, and he said that in the case of a shomer, there will at least be one shvua. I don't care how and what and where, there's going to be a shvua that he has to make. And that shvua is that he didn't convert. So far so that if that shvua falls by the wayside, I'm going to make him make another shvua.
Right.
In other words, a shvua you will make. The shvua that you'll make is that you didn't convert. If for some reason that shvua no longer holds water, for whatever reason, because it was stolen or burnt or whatever, I'm not letting you off the hook, says Rav Huna. I'm making you make a different shvua. There are others, Rav Gamaliel, maybe Rav Yehuda, others.
Why wouldn't the Chachamim reject Rav Huna because of all of the situation?
Because Rav Huna was a sizable personality. He was not. I mean, clearly Rav Huna was a major player in among the Amoraim, and we know that he was a gadol from we'll see tomorrow too, that he was one of the Gedolei Amoraim. So he commands the respect when he says make a shvua, even though others say shvua, what shvua? Why make a shvua? Still, Rav
Huna was, he was a Rosh Hashiva, not just one of the guys talking about the subject, and he did have a pasuk to lean on. I mean, in the situation with a shomer chinam, right, something disappears under mysterious circumstances.
Exactly.
There's a shavua for the person to say, I didn't lay my hands on it.
Right.
He says there's a shavua. There's a shavua. I mean, you can disagree with him, but he does have a lot of basis.
Yeah, but remember, but remember, all these things are balancing tests.
Right.
We're balancing yes shvua, no shvua against if you don't make a shvua. And again, what I said earlier was that in Rav Huna's mind, this shvua was necessary in order to preserve the integrity of mekach and memker, of business transactions. If you didn't make him make a shvua, then in the back of your mind, you would always worry, am I really getting a fair shake here? Because maybe this guy is a very nice fellow and I'm not going to lose because he's going to pay me the worth of the collateral, but I want the collateral. I don't want the money. I want the collateral. And if he's allowed to substitute money for the collateral, then I'm out my collateral. So that's Rav Huna coming in and saying, you know what? We're going to preserve the integrity of the mekach hamemker of the marketplace by making him make a shvua that he did not convert. And once we say that, then now we have a sort of a rolling dialogue. Okay, fine, you make a
was Rav Huna using the Shvua threat as a deterrent, and that's his actual motive behind it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's a deterrent from someone saying, there's no big deal if I substitute money for an item because I'm giving him fair value. I'm not cheating him. But Rav Huna says that's not the point. It's the point wasn't that you're not cheating him. The point is that, and we know this from other psukim, that some right, what's the pasuk? Yesh lo kab shalom mitisha kabim shel chavero. I'd rather have my goods than nine, the equivalent of 9 kabin from somebody else, because it's mine. And I want mine. I want what I have, not what somebody else has. So I think that Rav Huna, he has what to fall back on, even though we have problems with shvuas. Nevertheless, in this particular case, I think we can somehow find enough to say that there is legitimacy to what he's saying, even though in the general sense, we don't like to make shvuas.
Rabbi, this is a very controversial issue. Is there any record of a machlokas to Tanoim that this same issue came up?
Yeah, no, the answer is I haven't come across it, no. So in other words, I haven't seen where there's a machlokas Tanoim on this very point. And there's no reference to other Masechtos where it might have come up. So clearly this was something that was not controversial at that time, and it was only later that the Rav Huna came up, and once they were sort of digressing and getting into the Gemara, he says, wait a minute, now let's chew this over a little bit more. So let's just try to finish this portion, because then at least we'll have some closure here. So now the Abaya Omar. So as far as we're concerned right now, we're still sort of in limbo, and we're favoring the Loveh. So we're switching the Shavua to the Malveh. Now listen to this. Comes Abaya, and Abaya says, you know why we switch to the? And he's consistent. We're going to switch it to the Malveh, but you know why? Abaya Omar Gezerah Shema Yitin v'Yomelo Achas Shavua Mitzasa. You know why we're going to favor the Loveh here and switch it to the Malveh? Because the Malveh, he makes an oath, he doesn't have it, and it's 100% accurate oath. And then after he makes the oath, somehow that item appears. So when he made the oath, he made it in full faith and credit that he didn't have it. He said, I don't have it. And I'm going to swear to it. But what happens? Shema Yitin v'Yoma Acha Shavua Mitzasa. After I made the Shavua, someone found it for me and brought it to me, but through no doing of my own. If we so now we're stuck with the same thing. If it's the Loveh who made the Shavua on valuation, then the Malva will find him as a shakran and impugn his integrity, right? Because it's the Malveh who is the one who lost the collateral. The Malveh lost the collateral, and he says, you know what? I don't have it. It was stolen. It fell into the sea. Who knows what? And I mean it 100%. Says the Gemara. Nevertheless, he has to make the shvua as to valuation. Why? And Abaya says, because maybe, just maybe. Now, it's true we're dealing with a lot of maybes, but maybe, just maybe, someone somewhere will find this collateral, bring it back to the Malveh, and say, you made an announcement somewhere along the way that you lost collateral. Is this your lost collateral? And he says, sure, lo and behold, it's my lost collateral. If we had let the Loveh make the shvua, then the Malveh can say, you see, I finally got the collateral back, and I'm right, and the Loveh is wrong, and I'm going to impugn the integrity of the love. Says the Gemara. Therefore, even though it's as remote can be, and all the questions are valid questions, everybody asked a valid question here. But since it's so remote, nevertheless, we're going to protect the loveh, and we're going to make the malva make the shvua. So if it somehow comes back to him, he can't go back to the loveh and impugn the loveh's integrity. So that's Abaya. So that's how Abaya comes by this, and it says no one did anything wrong. He swore because he didn't have it. But what just happened in the event of, now, sometimes we don't like to play that and say, what if? But the Gemara is saying, what if? The Gemara is saying, Abaya is saying, what if? What if he went ahead and swore and said, I don't have it, and he meant it 100%. And then somehow, somewhere, it came back to him that that it came into his possession. So
One question, so to clarify, he's the malva, when the malva is making a shvua here, he's not making a shvua, or is he? He's not making a shvua to the value of the item. He's rather simply saying, I had this collateral that was collateral for this loan, and now and it's definitely gone. It was, it was definitely stolen. Or is he saying anything regarding the value?
yes. In other words, once we determine that it's definitely stolen, so to make a shvua that I don't have it is superfluous, because everybody knows it was stolen. The first case, burnt or stolen. So the Gemara is saying he doesn't need to make that shvua anymore because everybody knows it was stolen. So what shvua is he going to make? We have to make him make a shvua. The shvua we're going to make him make is, what's the value of the property? Now you can ask, why should that even be part of the discussion if it's gone, never to be found?
No, so I see why it would be a relevant part of the discussion, but the flip side is, I'm a rich guy and I make, 10 loans a day. And so I didn't get, he brings me the code, he says, so it's $100, I'll loan you $100, fine. I didn't bother to get the code appraised. How do I really know? And so now I'm making a shvua that, Shimon borrowed $100 and gave me $100 code as collateral, and now I get it back, and it turns out it's only worth $50, and not because it got messed up by the ganef. Then so I didn't. It's not a shvua sheker because I gave to the best of my knowledge at the time, and yet I'm making a shvua on something that I'm not really so sure about.
So, but you're sure enough to have made the statement to the loveh that the collateral was
good enough.
Right. So it's kind of put your money where your mouth is. If you already said that the collateral was a seller, then stick with it.
And yet, if let's say it wasn't stolen, and a month later the loveh came back and said, you know what, business went downhill, I just can't pay back the loan. I'd look at the coat and say, okay, I might take a look at the coat and say, well, all right, you gave him the coat as collateral, pull it out of the closet. Let's take a look. Let's get it appraised. Is this really, so therefore, because if it's worth more, then I'm going to give you the balance. And if it's not worth enough, then you'll still owe me or whatever. So we're basically throwing all that out the window when this happens.
Right. So the premise here, and we'll see it again, there's a pasuk a little bit later. The premise here is that the malveh knows more than the loveh. The malveh is a rich fellow. The loveh is not. In other words, in the balancing test, it's the loveh that we need to protect, because this poor loveh doesn't have enough money. He's got to borrow on collateral. The malveh is a wealthier guy. So in the balancing between a malveh and a loveh, who should we protect? So the Gemara inherently is saying we need to protect the loveh, because the loveh is the one who's more susceptible, which is why we switch that shvua from the loveh to the malveh. And we say, loveh, you're not going to be the one who is going to be making the shvua and put yourself on the line, because maybe you're wrong. The malveh, on the other hand, it's not fair to say, but maybe he can afford it. Maybe he can
Right.
afford it.
So I guess
because-
the answer then is that if you're a lender in this sort of a situation, then it's you have to do your if you're gonna, you have to sort of take into account that if something happened, I might have to make a shvua, and therefore I should do my due diligence at the beginning, whether it's an appraisal or whatever it is,
Exactly.
to make sure that the collateral is worth what I think it is.
Exactly.
Even though I might be, well, I guess it goes both ways. If I'd be willing to make do with the collateral being a little bit less, then I don't have to worry about it. But if I'm not, then I really need to make sure, even if I'll take collateral that's a little bit less now because it's close enough, to know what I'm in for.
Right, exactly. So this is the way the Amoron thought at the time. In other words, their thinking is, if I have a loiver and a malver, so who am I out to protect? Who's the one that needs to be more careful? Who can afford? Again, maybe who can afford, but so we're not as worried about the malver. Like you said, he'll do his due diligence. He'll go ahead. He'll protect himself. The lover, the poor guy, he's borrowing the money, and so he made a mistake. Okay, he thought it was a seller, three dinrim, or whatever the case may be. So you see a clear bias to protect the lover, which is why the Gemara keeps saying that that even if the collateral is lost, the malva still has to make a shvua as to its valuation to protect the lover, so that the lover shouldn't be the one left holding the bag at the end. If for some, who knows, out of left field reason, the item reappears and he made a statement that it was worth X and it's really worthwhile. Now this poor lover will never be able to really transact business, because they're going to say you're a liar. You went ahead and said it was worth 3 dinner a seller. It's worth only 3 dinner. So it's the lover that we're looking to protect, which is why Rav Huna says what he does, that in the beginning you have to have a shvua. If that shvua, 2 shvuas, the shvua that I didn't convert, and the shvua of valuation, and we make the malve make those shvuas because he's in a better position. Since he is a malve, he's in a better position to know and to evaluate, and therefore we have to rely more on him than on the lover, who may not know much about what's going on. And therefore, if the lover misspeaks, the repercussions are far greater than if the malve misspeaks. That's how the Gemara ultimately looks at this. So let's just finish. So okay, so in other words, Abai says this is a gezerah. Maybe it'll somehow appear after he made the shvua. Rav Ashi Omer, zen nishba v'zen nishba. That the borrower, the lender makes a shvua, and the borrower makes a shvua. Okay, so he takes a slightly different view. What is it? Zen nishba she'ena b'shusa. That the lender takes the vow that it's not in his reshus, right? Zen nishba kama havashava. And the borrower, so he takes a different view, and he says the borrower has to make a shvua how much it's worth, right? Mi nishba tchila, who makes the first vow according to Rashi? Malve nishba tchila. The malve makes the first vow. Shema yish bezeh v'yotze v'yotze. Halo es epikadon. So the first vow comes from the lender, and what's that vow? That it's not in my reshus, because if he doesn't make that vow and allows the borrower to make the first vow according to Rav Ashi as to valuation, then he's got him right in the crosshairs, because he's going to say it's worth a seller, and all of a sudden the malv is going to say, what are you talking about? Everybody knows it's only worth 3 dinrim, and he'll catch him dead to rights. So even Rav Ashi, who says that the borrower has to make a shvua, okay, unlike Rav Huna, no, we're going to make the borrower make a shvua too, but he makes the second shvua, because once the lender makes the first shvua that I don't have it, then that's a measure of protection for the borrower, according to Rav Ashi, and therefore he's more comfortable saying, showing that, that now I can swear as to its valuation because no one's going to pull a fast one on me and say, oh, wait a minute, here it is. You just lied. Why? Because he said, I don't have it. Okay. All right. So I again, this is a very, very gedreidel the Gemara, going back and forth, but I think we've kind of sort of settled it that we now have exhausted our discussion here as to the balancing test between the malveh and the loveh. We know certainly according to Rav Huna, it's the malveh that has to take the bigger responsibility. And we see even Rav Ashi, who says that the loveh makes a shvua, he still protects the loveh by saying that he makes the second shvua, thereby giving him a measure of protection, that if the malveh first makes a shvua that I don't have it, then the loveh can, he's a little bit more comfortable saying, yeah, this is what it's worth, because he's not as concerned that the malveh will pull a fast one and say, I got you. You said it was 3/4, it's really a seller. So again, in those days, maybe we look at it from our perspective and it's kind of like, okay, it's not that much of a big deal. But I guess in the time of the Gemara, these kind of transactions were very, very important. And the difference between 3 dinrim and a sela, or a shekel and a sela, were significant. And the rule generally is that we want to protect the loveh. So therefore, even in Rav Ashi's, where Rav Ashi is saying you do make a shvua, loveh, you make the second shvua. And by the time you make the shvua, you already know that the malveh made a shvua that he doesn't have it. So
maybe we have to think about these kinds of situations rather than $100. We should be thinking about 20,000.
yes,
A bigger impression.
bigger numbers, right?
I keep seeing $100 as no big deal.
For them it was a big deal, but for us, you're right. You just add a couple zeros, and now you've got something that's
Now we would we get a little. I would get a little more serious about it.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now you got skin in the game.
Yeah.
Right. He's got skin in the game. Right. Okay. So
Right.
right. So okay. So we'll stop here, and we'll pick up from Rav Huna Bar Taflefta Mishmei Rava. But again, you see, that's why I wanted to review this, because this is all based on Rav Huna's edict that a shvua has to be made, and all of the discussions about shvuas that we've said in the past, you have to put that aside, because even though we know we don't like to make shvuas, but according to Rav Huna, this is an essential shvua, and it can't go unanswered.
Yeah.
And again, the point of it is because that's all about mekach and memker. That's the lifeblood of people's. There has to be a system of nemanas, of being trustworthy. That otherwise it's hefker. I'll be your shomer. I'll take it and whatever. So okay, so that's where we are. So Laman and I'll, Mr. Shem, we'll pick it up from here. But it's a fascinating. And now we're going to get to the punchline next week as to why we have this imbalance between a lender and a borrower, and we'll see where it comes from. The Gemara is going to tell us where that imbalance comes from. It's a pasuk in Mishlei as to why we have this imbalance between a lender and a borrower. Maybe not something you normally think about, but if you had a choice, would you rather be a borrower or a lender? So for the most part, you'd rather be a lender, not a borrower. Okay.
They said be either one.
Yeah, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Yeah, right.
Yes, Shakach, Rabbi.
Rabbi.